Hi and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman and today I want to share with you some ideas on how you can use some of your scrap stash. Many of us have lots of various size strips in our scrap stash and crumbs. Many people will call them crumbs. And I'm going to show you how you can use them for applique. You can strip up some beautiful applique elements and make some really beautiful quilts. So let me show you how we can go about doing this. So for this block here, what I did was I used some cardstock elements, and I just used a circle and some leaves that you can easily create, and I traced those onto some used dryer sheets, and I'm going to show you how I went through this process. So I'm using strips, lots of crumbs, and used dryer sheets for this. But on this particular block, you'll see that I actually stripped together a lot of these crumbs or teeny tiny strips from my stash. And then I used regular fabrics, pieces of fabrics that were large enough for the petals of this flower. And I'm going to take you through this step by step on how I did it. So with the dryer sheets, I love to use my used dryer sheets for a lot of strip piecing in quilting. I don't like to throw my used dryer sheets in the trash, so I have a huge bag of them, which I'll show you here in a minute, of used dryer sheets, and I simply just press them. And my dryer sheets might be a different size than yours. It depends on the brand that you're using. These are about 6 by 9 inches. So you can see here that I've traced 5 different leaf petals or flower petals, if you will, on this. And so what I have done is I've gone through my strips of fabric, and maybe you can see it better if I show you this. And I have just literally pieced crumbs together. They're just strips of various, in this case I put together a lot of different greens, and I've sewn them in strips, and then I've taken the traced flower petal or leaf petal, whichever you want to refer to it as, from my used dryer sheet, and I've loosely cut it out, and I have actually sewn right on the drawn line. I've gotten a nice tight stitch there that I've sewn right on that drawn line. And then what I've done is I have pulled the used dryer sheet away from the fabric itself and cut a slit in there, and this allows me to be able to turn this. So I have a self-faced unit here, and it turns into this. So this one I've already turned, and I can press it, and then I can use it to applique down onto my block, onto my quilt. So this is a wonderful way to use up your dryer sheets that you have used from your dryer. Just once your load of laundry is dried, pull out your laundry, and then also gather your dryer sheets and put them in a bag. That's what I like to do as I gather them and save them. So that's what I'm doing here. I am facing these leaf petals. I also will face this strip of, it's a round circle. I've got strips of fabric here that I have sewn together, and I'm going to cut this out loosely around here, and then I will separate the dryer sheet from the backing, and I will snip that, and then I will turn it right side out so that this element will look similar to this right here. I mentioned a moment ago that I'd show you my bag. So here is my bag filled with used dryer sheets. And I use these for making all sorts of strip piecing in quilts. And I've shown some videos. I'll link some of those below in the description box. I have so many more projects to show you using this. So keep in tune with my channel so that you'll see all of the things that I have to show you regarding this. But basically, once they come out of the dryer, they're used dryer sheets, and then I'll throw them in this bag, and then when I get ready to use them, I'll press them so they're nice and flat because they're very wrinkled in here. I'll press them, and then I can use them. So this is what I have done for today. I've got this circle here. So this is how I go about getting these faced. So as you can see, as I mentioned before, these are stripped together. All of these pink various crumb strips are stripped together. And I am loosely cutting around this circle. I'm giving about 1/4 of an inch outside that stitched line. I don't want to break the stitching there. That's important that that remains intact. And now I'm going to pull these two apart, and whoops, and then I'm going to simply put a little cut in the dryer sheet there, and then I can make it a little bit larger cut, and now I can start turning this element here. So I've got the center of my flower, or you can use these circles for whatever you'd like. It would create a beautiful art quilt by just scrapping up your stash of crumbs and strips and put a beautiful background up on your design wall, and then just start playing with all of your scraps, your strips and your crumbs, and create all sorts of designs. So I'm going to have to go through and make sure that I get the creases out of there so it's a nice perfectly round shape. But there it is. And you do the same thing with the flowers, or with the leaves, excuse me. Let me show you this. I guess they are flower petals. That's what I'm using these for, but they could certainly be leaves if that's what you choose to use them for. And I'm simply going to cut loosely around the outside edge, just as I did with the other, with the circle. And then I'm going to separate the dryer sheet from the fabric. And what I had done was I applied that dryer sheet to the right side of the fabric, and then stitched on the drawn line, and then we'll simply turn it. And this is kind of fiddly, so it's going to take me a while. I'll do this off camera, but you'll get the idea here. I'm simply going to be turning this, and I'll poke out the points and make sure that I get all of the sides of it nice and curved so it looks like a nice element here. And once I've done all of that, then I will place that on my block and start putting these pieces together in a beautiful applique piece. And in this case, I used the stripped section in the center. I did some fancy embroidery around the outside as I appliqued it. You can do whatever you want. And then for these, I simply used pieces of fabric that I had left over. I traced out the element again with this onto my dryer sheets, put the dryer sheet on the fabric, cut it out loosely, turned it right side out so that these are all faced, and they were pressed nicely, and then I was able to do a zigzag stitch all the way around. There is so much you can do with your strips, your crumbs, and used dryer sheets. So this is just one aspect of what can be done with these items. First, I want to show you how I use some of these crumbs and strips that I have. Let me make sure that you're able to see what I'm doing well here. There we go. Okay, so here's some of my leftover crumbs and strips that have been used in various projects. They're kind of oddball looking, right? Well, I'm just going to start sewing some of these together so that I can create more leaves. I need a few more of these, or flower petals, depending on what you're creating. So let me go ahead and just start sewing some of these strips here. I think I'll use the center section here. That's the area where I'm going to draw in my leaf. Okay, so I'm starting a section here that I'll be using where I will have my leaf. And so I'm just using parts and pieces. Anything that will fit, anything that will work. They're put together as really slanted, straight, whatever. It doesn't really matter. This is actually long enough here for one leaf, but I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to sew that one on as well. Just get a little bit more length on it. All right, so now I have a crumb piece made up of crumbs and strips, basically. And now what I want to be able to do is to place one of these leaves on it so that I can have another applique leaf element. So let me loosely cut out this leaf. Hopefully you can see the drawn element there. Maybe you can see it better on the white sewing machine. So I'm going to first of all take this to the ironing board and press it, and then I'm going to pin this on here, and then I'm going to come back and stitch on that drawn line. I'll be right back. All right, so I have pinned the element on there. I've pressed this grouping here so it's flat, and I have pinned the leaf element on there. Now I'm going to take it down here to the machine, and I'm going to stitch with a small stitch, probably a 2.2 or maybe even a 2.0 stitch, and I'm going to stitch right on the drawn line. All right, there it is done. And you can certainly backstitch if you want. I didn't bother with it, but you can certainly backstitch if you feel that would make it more secure. Now I'm going to loosely cut out this leaf. I'm cutting about 1/4 of an inch outside the drawn line. And then I'm going to pull this away, snip it, cut a little bit bigger area in there for turning, and I will turn that leaf. And for the flower that I happen to be making, I need 10 of these leaves or flower petals, and so that's what I'm going to do. And I'll use a pin, or you can use the purple fang. I have a purple fang, which for some reason I cannot locate it this morning, but a purple fang is a great tool to be able to turn things and poke out corners and so forth. But so if you have one, definitely use it. But I'm just using a pen here to get things turned. So I have a bunch of these now that are all turned, and I need to take them to the ironing board and get them pressed, and then they'll be ready to get placed onto my block, and I can create another beautiful flower. So let me press these. I'll be back. All right, so I have a 15-inch square here that I have cut from a background fabric, and the first thing I'm going to do is apply the center of this flower. And what I've done, I've creased some creases in the background square itself. That helps you to center things. I've also pressed creases in my circle here so that I can line it up just exactly in the center. So I'm lining up all 4 of those creases. I'm looking at this from the side here, so hopefully I've got them lined properly. And I wanted my strips to kind of go sideways. I didn't want them to go up and down or this way, so they're kind of going at a diagonal. And that's what I prefer. So I'm going to pin that. And then I'm going to take all of my leaves that I have created, and I'm going to start placing them on the unit as well, and just have fun with your placement and where the flowers are. Actually, I guess in this case I've used some different size petals, so I'm only using a total of 8 here. I could certainly squeeze these together and add some more, but I think I like just the 8. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, all of the background square, I do like my background squares to start out larger, because once you do your applique, it sometimes makes the block reduced in size. And so that way, if you wanted a 14-inch block or a 12.5-inch block, then you'll actually have what you need so that the block itself, when it's completely appliqued, will fit properly into your quilt. And in this case, I think I'm just going to be doing a table runner with these, so I'm not too concerned about the ultimate size. I'll deal with that when I'm finished. But right now, what I'm going to do is start appliquing. I'm going to first of all applique the circle, and I think I'm going to find just kind of a fancy stitch that I'm going to applique, and then I'll come back and I'll applique all of these. For the time being, I don't really need these on here. I am going to set up my machine with a beautiful pink embroidery thread. Let's see, what do I have here? That one's kind of purple, that one's dark. I think I'm going to go look for a different pink. I've got numbers of these embroidery threads, so I'm going to find one that I think matches even better than these two. And I'm going to set up my machine, and I'll show you the stitch that I'm going to use. Just wanted you to see, I did find a pink that I think will work beautifully. So this is the embroidery thread. It's a rayon thread, and it just has a beautiful sheen to it. I have a number of these various colored rayon embroidery threads that I like to use for applique. I've set up my machine with the pink embroidery thread. Make sure you put foot on that will allow you to do a decorative stitch if that's what you're planning to use. I had on my 1/4 inch piecing foot, which is this one. I love this piecing foot for when I'm piecing quilts, but you obviously, it's got a point, just a tiny little point there for the needle, so you cannot do any sort of a zigzag or a decorative stitch using this. Make sure that you remove it before you start stitching. I've had that problem before when I've broken needles, a number of needles, because I forget about it. But make sure you remove that, and let me show you the zigzag stitch that I'm going to be using here. It's a simple little one. Some of it is going to zig onto the circle, some of it is going to zag onto the background square. Let me get some of it done here so that you can kind of see what it looks like. Not sure that you're able to see that yet, but when I'm done here, I'll continue around the circle and then I'll give you a close-up. It's fun to be able to use some of your decorative stitches whenever you're appliquing, because often we have so many beautiful decorative stitches on our machines that we don't really have an opportunity to use. So doing some fun art applique type quilts like this gives you that opportunity. I'm going to get rid of these threads here that I had pulled up at the beginning. I'm going to see if I can somehow end up where I started. I'm going to do a back stitch. Okay. It's not always possible to end it exactly where you'd like it, but it's pretty close. So let me give you a close-up of that. Can you see the beautiful zigzag stitch that just goes all the way around? It's zagging out to the background and zigging into the applique element itself. So that one is finished. Now I'm going to pin down all of my leaves, and I'll choose another stitch for appliquing my flower petals or leaves, whichever you'd like to call them. I have my flower petals all pinned down and ready to go. I'm only using 8 of the 10 that I used, but I like it, what it looks like. I'm going to use this beautiful green embroidery applique thread to applique each of these elements down. I'm going to use a different stitch. It could be I end up using a zigzag. I'm not sure. We'll see once I get it up onto the sewing machine. But there's so much you can do with this. You could even make a larger petal behind these and add this one on top. You could do so much. Just be creative. You could even find coloring books that have fun, easy elements that you can trace, and you can use those elements to create some beautiful quilts. You can go out to Google and Google some free clip art for flowers and trees or whatever it is that you'd like to create using your stash of strips and your crumbs and your dryer sheets to create these faced elements. So I ended up using just a plain applique stitch for the flower petals, and I used that green thread and simply use that applique stitch all the way around. And I'm going to do that for all of them. So the center has this beautiful decorative stitch. These will be appliqued like that, and then this one will be ready. If you have issues with your background fabric curling under as you are appliquing. You might want to use some sort of an interfacing, a very light woven interfacing, or maybe even a very light fusible interfacing behind the background square. And that will give that background more stability so that your, when you do the applique, it's not curling up into the applique element itself. I didn't have any problem with this fabric. It seems to be sturdy enough that it worked well. Sometimes when you're using a soft muslin or a cotton fabric that's just maybe a looser weave, you sometimes do have issues with that, and the background then kind of curls up under the in the sewing machine. So if you need to use some sort of a background stabilizer, that's a great idea to do that. I didn't have to in this case. But this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to put this one together, and then I think what I'll do for my table runner is create a strip-pieced center block for the table runner, and then these two blocks will be on the outside. And so once I get that finished, I'll be showing you that so you can see how that is done. So I have two of my blocks ready to go. I have used my strips, the crumbs, and used dryer sheets to create these two blocks. What I'm going to do now is create another video. So this is part one. Part two is going to be another video where my middle block is going to be using strips from my stash with used dryer sheets, and I'm going to do a quilt as you go method in that. So you'll want to make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button so you'll know when that new video comes out. That should be out this next week. I want to do a quilt as you go on the middle block as well as these two blocks. So that is coming up. I want you to make sure you get to see that. It'll be a fun one. I hope that you'll make something similar to this and post it out on my Facebook page. I love to see things that my viewers are working on. I have a Quilting with Lori and then a Scrap Up Your Stash group page. Love to see your projects, blocks you're working on, quilts that you're working on, so make sure you post out there. And for now, I just want to wish you a happy week and happy quilting, and I'll be back soon with the quilt as you go techniques that will go along with this table runner that I've created. Hope you've enjoyed this additional idea on how to use up your scrap stash as well as your crumbs and your used dryer sheets. Have a great week.